Every major conflict creates two wars. The war happening on the ground and the war happening online. And lately, one phrase keeps surfacing over and over again across social media, podcasts, comment sections, and political debates. The Greater Israel Project. Some people say it's proof of a hidden geopolitical agenda, others say it's propaganda, and others say it's a misunderstanding of biblical history mixed with modern internet paranoia. But regardless of where you stand politically, one thing is undeniable. This phrase has become emotionally powerful. And tonight, we're breaking it down. Not with screaming, not with blind loyalty, and not with internet clips cut out of context. We're going to talk about where the idea comes from, the biblical references people point to, and the difference between ancient scripture and modern governments, and why narratives like this spread so aggressively online. Because whether you believe the phrase means something real or something exaggerated, millions of people are talking about it. Welcome back to PSIND. First, let's establish something important immediately. When people say Greater Israel, they are usually referring to the idea that Israel either should expand or intends to expand, or is spiritually connected to a much larger territory than its current borders. And almost every conversation about it eventually leads back to the Bible. Specifically passages in the Old Testament describing land promised to the descendants of Abraham. One of the most commonly referenced verses is Genesis 15:18. Now, historically and religiously, many people interpret verses like this symbolic, spiritually, historically. But here's where the conversation becomes complicated. Ancient biblical descriptions are not the same thing as modern international law, and that distinction matters a lot. Because modern borders are shaped through war, treaties, diplomacy, international recognition, and political agreements. It's not ancient scripture alone. And if we're being intellectually honest, that principle applies globally. You cannot simply point to ancient texts from thousands of years ago and automatically use them as legal justification for modern territorial expansion. Because if every nation on earth started redrawing borders based on ancient kingdoms, empires, or religious claims, the entire world map would collapse into a chaos. And that's an uncomfortable conversation some people don't want to have. Now, to understand why this topic is so emotionally charged, you have to understand something deeper about the Middle East. Land there is never just land. It's identity, it's religion, it's ancestry, it's trauma, and it's survival. It's history layered on top of history, layered on top of bloodshed. And because of that, every border carries emotional weight far beyond maps. And that's why conversations about Israel and Palestine instantly become so explosive online. People aren't just arguing politics, they're arguing morality, history, faith, victimhood, justice, and security. And when conversations become that emotionally loaded, nuance usually dies first. Now let's talk history for a moment. After World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, support grew internationally for a creation of a Jewish homeland. In 1948, the modern state of Israel was established, and almost immediately conflict followed it. Wars, displacement, territorial disputes, and decades of instability. Then came the Six-Day War in 1967. Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. That moment changed everything. To supporters of Israel, these territories became critical for security and survival. To critics, it became evidence of occupation and expansion. And ever since then, settlements and territorial control have remained some of the most controversial political issues on Earth. And here's where online conversations often spiral. People take legitimate geopolitical disputes and combine them with ancient prophecy, internet speculation, edited clips, symbolic maps, and emotional outrage, until eventually everything gets blended together into one giant theory. And once that happens, people stop separating documented facts from assumptions about intent. And honestly, the internet made this problem infinitely worse. Because most people don't learn geopolitics from books, they learn it from 40-second TikToks, viral tweets, podcasts, clips with dramatic music, and anonymous accounts speaking with absolute certainty. Imagine trying to understand centuries of conflict through a 15-second video. That's modern information culture. Everybody's an expert, and nobody slows down, and everybody's emotionally activated. And algorithms reward the most aggressive interpretation possible. Not the most accurate, the most emotional, the most divisive, and the most fear-inducing. Because outrage spreads faster than nuance every single time. That's where things get dangerous. Because skepticism is healthy. Questioning governments is healthy. Always. Questioning media narratives is always healthy. And every government on Earth has lied before. America, Russia, China, Iran, Israel, they all have. That's reality. But there's a difference between skepticism and becoming so emotionally attached to a narrative that every single event automatically becomes proof of one massive, coordinated secret plan. At that point, you're no longer analyzing information objectively, you're filtering reality through a conclusion you already chose emotionally. And once humans do that, facts stop mattering. Now let's be fair here too. Extremist rhetoric absolutely exists in every country. There have been radical political figures and religious extremists who made aggressive statements about territory and control. That is always true. But extremist rhetoric is not the same as officially, universally agreed government policy. And people online constantly blur that line. One politician says something radical, and then suddenly the internet acts like it represents millions of people universally. And that happens everywhere now, not just in Israel. Another reason the Greater Israel narrative spreads so aggressively is because maps are psychologically powerful. And people see maps online showing biblical territories stretching across large portions of the Middle East, and instantly many assume this must be the real plan. But historical and religious maps do not automatically equal current state policy, and that distinction matters enormously. Because throughout history, countless civilizations reference larger historical or spiritual territories. That doesn't automatically mean modern governments are actively trying to militarily claim all of them. Again, history, religion, and modern geopolitics are not always interchangeable. And once people stop separating those categories, confusion explodes. Now here's a deeper layer nobody really talks about. Why are people so drawn to these theories in the first place? Because modern society created massive distrust. People feel manipulated constantly by media, by corporations, by politicians, by algorithms, by propaganda, by lobbyists, and by billionaires. And honestly, some of that distrust is justified. Governments absolutely protect strategic interest. Powerful institutions absolutely shape narratives. And money, APEC, absolutely influences politics. That's not conspiracy, that's reality. But once trust collapses completely, people become vulnerable to believing that every major world event must secretly connect together behind one hidden master plan. And psychologically, that's comforting. But chaos is uncomfortable. Randomness is uncomfortable. And complexity is uncomfortable. A giant hidden explanation feels cleaner, simpler, more emotionally satisfying. Even when reality is more complicated, and social media supercharges this process because emotionally charged content gets rewarded instantly. Fear gets rewarded, anger gets rewarded, and certainty gets rewarded. Nuance gets buried. And once somebody emotionally commits to a worldview online, the algorithm feeding them more and more content just reinforces that. And soon their reality just becomes an echo chamber. And that's happening on all sides politically. That's not just this issue. At the end of the day, the Middle East conflict is already complicated enough without forcing every event into a simplified movie narrative. There are real issues happening. Territorial disputes, security concerns, civilian suffering, extremism, political corruption, military interest, and historical trauma. All of those things exist simultaneously. And reducing everything down to there's one secret project controlling everything usually oversimplifies reality instead of explaining it. Now, does that mean governments should never be questioned? Absolutely not. You question the governments, you question the media, and you question the narratives more than anything. No matter what side of the aisle it is, you are always questioning what they are telling you, no matter what. But also question your own emotional attachment to certainty. Because the moment you become unable to separate evidence from assumption, you become manipulatable as well. And that applies to everybody. Every ideology, every country, and every political movement. Maybe the real danger isn't one hidden project. Maybe the real danger is millions of people becoming incapable of slowing down long enough to separate history from propaganda, scripture from policy, and symbolism from strategy, and emotion from evidence. Because once people lose that ability, narrative becomes more powerful than truth itself. Now, if you want me to try to connect this episode to what's going on in Iran, I can do that real quick. In my eyes, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen, we are heavily enforced by Israel to go to this war and to continue this war. Do I think that Israel has intentions of the Greater Israel project? I wouldn't say directly, but indirectly, absolutely. Their intent is to spread their borders because they are, in their eyes, entitled to more land. Now, when it comes to government and drawing country lines, you should have never agreed to that in the first place. Because the more that we try to expand these lines, it's the same thing as Russia and Ukraine. Russia wants to take over this land. Ukraine won't give it up. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. We're drawing new lines is not going to fix anything. It's going to cause way more chaos. And it's really just about causing unrest in the world, not just in the nation, in the world. Like, screw the no new wars shit. Screw what the gas prices are doing. In the end of the day, it's not about who we align with. It's about remembering that we are for ourselves before another country. And I think that's where our government has fallen so into the trap of AIPAC and Israel enforced policies. And, like, I'm not trying to be anti-Semitic here. Like, don't put me in that category, because that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say Jews are pieces of crap. That's just a stupid thing to say. But in the end of the day, it's more or less we need to account for ourselves before we account for somebody else. If you like this, hit like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. We got a Facebook page, PS_IND. We do polls for episodes. At least we will be doing them on the next episode. Yeah, that's all I got. Catch you in the next one. Peace.